Santi is a 25-year-old young man who works hard in a sand mine. Even though he doesn't earn much, he always remembers his mother and sends her a couple of little gifts from time to time. But suddenly the shipping rates went up and Santi can no longer afford it, so he tries to reduce the weight. Until only 3 cookies are left, but the person in charge tells him that it doesn't matter, because the minimum amount is 50 baht something that unfortunately he can't afford. Afterwards, disappointed, he eats the cookies. Then he sees that there was a conference by one of the richest men in Thailand, and Santi decides to attend, even though it was only for students. Here we meet Mr. Cannon, who was born poor but is now one of the richest men in Thailand. He says that if you want to be rich, you have to be the first in line. Santi asks him how he can be the first in line if he doesn't have any money, to which Mr. Cannon replies that there is money in the air. He just has to find a way to see it, which means that everyone needs something, you just have to find a way to sell it to them. This awakens a fierce hunger in Santi. Seeing how bold Mr. Cannon was, he asks him his name. When he returned to work, Santi was no longer the same. Now he had an idea to save the sand mine where he worked, since their buyers didn't want to pay a fair price, but Santi learned what a monopoly is. If you have all the product, then you set the price. At the next meeting with the buyer, Santi tells him that they have allied with all the sand mines. So now they have to pay the price they ask for, otherwise they won't sell them anything. At first, the buyer threatens to leave and buy from someone else in another state. But Santi tells him that would mean even more costs, and in the end, he would end up paying more than what they're asking for. With that, he manages to close the deal, his boss is happy, and pays him 10 times more than what he used to earn. Also, he makes him the manager of the mine. He thanks his boss, but tells him he can't accept because he wants much more. His boss tells him that he's very hungry. He answers yes because he grew up in a very poor family where he didn't have shoes and had to hunt. If he wanted to eat, the only thing he had was himself. That's why he got tired of being poor. Seeing that his idea worked, he's willing to risk everything just to become rich.
Así que le dice a su jefe.
He asks for a kilo of money, and in exchange, he'll give him a business plan for a whole year. The boss gladly accepts, and Santi heads to the city. With his first payment, he sent his mother lots of cookies. She asked him not to spend his money anymore and to save it for himself. But he tells her that he got promoted and now he earns a lot of money. Even though he was already in the city and had quit his previous job, he was sure that he could build an empire. So he started working as a tour guide. There, he learned everything he could and worked very hard to save money. But there he realized the harsh reality. The one who works the most is not always the one who earns the most. But luckily, one day he met a VIP tour guide. He served the richest clients and earned in a month what Santi made in a year. That's why he wants to join him. But Jimmy tells him it's not as easy as he thinks. Even so, Santi insists and tells him he'll give him 1,000,000 baht to let him join. That was all the money Santi had. He was willing to risk everything just to achieve his goal. But when he meets his first client, a rich man, he realizes that things wouldn't be so simple. He was focused on his girl and didn't want to listen to Santi. Later, the girl tells him not to be so obvious and that she'll help him sell an apartment. She gets him a lipstick in a very special color. Santi looks around and sees a very pretty girl, so he knows that's the ideal color. He approaches her and offers to buy her lipstick. At first, she doesn't want to, but he insists until he manages to convince her, though she asks for double the price. Santi was captivated by her beauty, and he tells her that he doesn't have enough cash, so he gives her an advance and says he'll give her the rest later. At night, just so he can see her, but when she drops her client off at the hotel, he tells her she can't leave yet. She has to do him one last favor first. He tells her that he likes having an audience when he does his things. He replies that he's not a pervert and doesn't do that kind of stuff, but the client tells him that if he fulfills his fantasy, he'll buy an apartment from him. Santi shows him the photos, and the Chinese client tells him that nobody will buy that. Apparently, Jimmy had scammed him and gave him the worst locations. But to convince him, he tells him he'll pay him triple and introduce him to his friends so he can sell to them too. And with that, well, the client gets whatever he wants. The next day, when he arrives at the hotel, the girl he bought the lipstick from had already left. But she left a note with the receptionist accusing him of being a scammer. Sometime later, he travels to China to try to sell his apartments to his rich client's friends. But at the bar where the party was being held, Mr. Canine was also there. Santi greets him, but he barely remembers him. Then, the Chinese client takes him to his friends and asks him to talk about his skills in bed. But Santi doesn't understand and immediately starts offering his apartments. This makes the Chinese people upset and they don't even want to listen to him. The VIP client tells him to leave if he's not going to have fun. He replies that he came to work, to which the Chinese man says he's fed up and challenges him to drink 3 glasses in a row so he'll buy an apartment from him out of pity. Santi gets offended and tells him he doesn't want his pity, but he's willing to make a bet with him. If he drinks 20 drinks, he'll buy 20 apartments from him. His friends tell him not to be a coward and to accept the bet. In the end, the Chinese client agrees, but he brings out a much stronger drink. Santi starts drinking like crazy. Mr. Kanan was watching him and decides to help by sending him a few bottles of water. But the Chinese client tells him that if he gets help, the bet is off. Everyone was very happy with the boy's attitude, but after 10 shots, he passes out. The Chinese client wakes him up, and Santi remembers where he comes from, so the game starts again. He starts drinking everything at once, and after that, he's completely knocked out. The next day, everything was gone. The Chinese client calls him to scold him, but then says it was fun. Then, he asks him to send his dog's dish. At the shipping company, he realizes that China has much lower prices. That's when Santi gets an idea. This business is a gold mine. When he returns to his country, Mr. Kanan recognized him and bought him a first-class ticket. He tells him that he has a lot of guts, and that's why he wants to hire him. But Santi turns him down because he doesn't want to work for anyone anymore. Now he found a fantastic idea and wants to be first in line. Mr. Kanan is intrigued and offers to buy all the apartments he's selling just to hear his idea, and he tells him about his plan to launch an express delivery service in Thailand. Mr. Kanan also thinks it's a good idea and they both start working together. As a sign of their friendship, he gives him an expensive watch. Santi accepts and promises to be worthy of wearing it. When they meet with the Chinese team, it turns out that the girl with the lipstick was working with them. Her name is Xiaoyu, and she was very upset with Santi because she thought he had scammed her. That's why she was very cold and blunt. She always found the negative side to his proposals. Even so, one of her colleagues agreed to invest in Santi's idea. But the Chinese boss wasn't sure. He didn't believe there was a leader capable of carrying out the ambitious project. But Santi tells them his story. When he was a child, he would save up for a couple of months just to eat instant noodles. But one day he went to the city and realized they were much cheaper there. He discovered it was because of logistics. The shipping cost made everything more expensive. That's why his dream is for people in the countryside to enjoy things too. It's important, and with your help, he believes he can achieve it. That convinces the investor who wanted to close the deal, but Xiao Yu tells him to wait a little longer and give him some time to analyze the information more thoroughly. Later, Santi was getting impatient, so he offers to be a tour guide for the Chinese visitors. He does this in order to find out why Xiao Yu postponed the deal. She tells him that he seems too desperate. She also noticed that he paid people to send shipments, so that they would believe the market is bigger than it actually is. Santi tries to deny it, but in the end, it turned out to be true. Mr. Cannon tells him that it wasn't wrong, it was only wrong that he got caught. That's why he gives him a check to try to bribe Xiao Yu, so they can close the deal. But before that, he gets a call from his hometown. His younger brother had been arrested. Santi goes to get him out and tells him to stay out of trouble and think about their mother. He replies he's already spent time with her. Unlike him, who left for the city, Santi gets upset but gives him money so he won't get into more trouble. He throws it away and tells him he's just like their father, a guy who was never home. He only came by once in a while and left a little money, thinking that would fix everything. This really upsets Santi, who never wanted to be like him. That's why, instead of bribing Xiao Yu, he apologizes for trying to deceive her and begs her to give him another chance. She looks at him and tells him that deception is deception. The next day, the meeting would take place. Santi had bought champagne to celebrate, but he was still worried. When the meeting starts, Xiao Yu gives him the good news. They had agreed to close the deal and would have to open 50 branches across the country. That night, Santi celebrates with his whole team, and Mr. Canine thanks him for making it possible. Later, Santi calls his mother. He wanted to tell her what happened, but he thought it wasn't the right time yet. The next day, Xiao Yu was returning to her country, So Santi took the opportunity to ask her why she agreed to close the deal. She answered that everyone deserves a second chance. Santi is happy and takes the chance to ask for her number. She gives it to him, but it turns out she had a boyfriend. So she asks him to only contact her for work-related matters. Even so, Santi sent her a gift and took the opportunity to pay her back the money he owed her for that lipstick he bought from her on the boat. Sometime later, Santi decided to close a chapter in his life. He didn't want to be like his father, but even if he didn't like it, he knew there was a lot of his father in him. That's why he goes to find him and offers to buy the house where they grew up. With that money, they'll be even. And he tells him that he doesn't need him anymore. From now on, he'll take care of his mother and his brother. Then he goes to work as a laborer because he wanted to finish the branches ahead of schedule. But Xiaoyu calls him and gives him bad news. Mr. Conan, who was supposedly his friend, had proposed a capital increase, meaning that everyone invested more money and consequently bought more shares. So the 19% that Santi had became only 1.9%. With that dirty move, they practically kicked Santi out of the company. Mr. Kanan was a ruthless businessman and did all that so his son would be the one to run the company. Santi was furious because once again, life was turning its back on him. But he wasn't going to give up so easily, not after coming this far. That's why he tells Mr. Kanan that he'll open his own company and that it will be 10 times bigger. Mr. Kanan laughs and tells him he won't be more than a fly. Then he calls Xiao Yu and asks her to help him find a team. That's how he meets Luigi, a skilled programmer, who was also deceived and lost his company. Santi promises him that it won't happen if he works with him, but Luigi was very smart. He tells him he's not the right person. Besides, he had a meeting with Mr. Kanan's son. They wanted to hire him to develop their app, but being so special, he realizes that Mr. Kanan's son had no idea what he wanted to do. He only came there for that reason. So he decides to go back to China. But Santi was waiting for him. He tells him that he knew he wouldn't accept working with them. But Luigi doesn't want to listen. He just asks him to take him to the airport. Santi obeys, but before they arrive, he takes a detour and tells him that he won't let him go so easily. To convince him, he tells him that every second they're not working, they're losing money. Luigi realizes that he's really crazy, so he laughs and agrees to work with him, because he was crazy too. Santi gets really excited and tells Xiao Yu that he managed to convince Luigi. She, on her part, was facing financial problems, but not because of herself, but because of her father, who had a fraud accusation against him. Although her boyfriend was rich, she didn't want his money. That's why she asks him to postpone the wedding at least for 2 years, because she wants to be part of Santi's company and earn a lot of money, so she can pay off her father's debt and recover the house she had lost. After the company becomes successful, she will be able to get married. Her boyfriend loves her very much, so he accepts her conditions. A few days later, we see how the two crazy people start to form their team. Luigi wanted a very special team. That's why he asked very particular questions. And he was very tough on them to see if they could handle the pressure. But so far, no one had managed to do it. The next interviewee was Xiao Yu, who had given up everything to be part of the company. He promises to get investors and doesn't want to be paid. He wants to be given shares because he's going to bet everything.
Al éxito de la empresa, a Luigi.
She supports the company and that's what she has, but she wants to be paid because she's just as desperate as they are and knows she'll do whatever it takes to make it work. Meanwhile, we see that Mr. Kanan is pressuring his son and his team to hurry things up and get started as soon as possible. He wanted his son to feel that hunger for success, but he was a more laid-back guy. On the other hand, Luigi's team was complete, and they move into a building to create the first interface. But he was a very demanding boss, and he tells them they have to finish it in just 3 days. Meanwhile, Santi and Xiao Yu had to find investors. So they went to every meeting, private party, or any place where there were people with money. They were sure that at least one of them would want to invest in their idea, but no matter how hard they tried, nobody wanted to invest in a completely unknown company. But despite everything, Santi still had hope. He believed that out there was a wealthy person who would see his potential. But Mr. Kanan's company had sent him, because they had already brought their company to market much earlier than planned. In the presentation, they used Santi's story as a slogan. He was furious But instead of breaking down, he used that anger as fuel and promised to crush Mr. Canaan's company. But the investors, knowing that it would be a direct competitor to this new company, think it would be too risky. Later, when they return to the office, one of the programmers comes out crying. After the company fired her because she wanted to take a few days off to see her sick mother. Because of that, a big fight breaks out. Since they can't find investors, Luigi thought all his work would be in vain. But suddenly Xiao Yu gets a call. Someone wants to meet them. The three of them go out to find her. When they arrive, the investor is about to leave, so they buy 2 tickets just to be able to talk to her. The investor, seeing the effort they had made, said she decided to give them 5 minutes of her time. They explained their project to her, although the investor tells them it's not necessary because she's very interested and wants to invest with them. But first, she wanted to know how they would beat their direct competition. Santi says that they will make home deliveries, so they will be able to crush anyone who gets in their way. The investor is convinced and tells them that she will give them the money they need. But in exchange, she wants 30% of the money. Santi wants to accept, but luckily Luigi arrives and tells him he can't do it because that would be giving away his company. In the end, Santi tells her he'll only give her 15%. She says that's not enough, so she leaves. Our protagonists are left devastated because she was the only investor who was willing to give them money. Luckily, she calls them back and tells them she accepts their conditions, but she wants them to change the name. After a lot of hard work, they had finally made it. They finally had everything to launch their project. To celebrate, Santi takes his whole team out for a trip. Even though Luigi was a workaholic and couldn't relax for even a single day, because of that, Santi throws him into the sea and all his teammates follow him. But the boat leaves and they are left completely alone. Besides, Luigi didn't know how to swim. Being alone in the sea, the team comes together and they forget all about work. But an hour passed and the boat didn't come back. The team thought they would die at sea, but luckily the boat returned, and once they were safe, it turns out that everything was planned by Santi because he wanted the team to forget everything. And that was the only way he found. His plan worked because Luigi stopped working and invited his team to dinner while they were heading home. There was a storm, and Xiao Yu tells him that what they're doing is like chasing a storm. Santi replies that that's why it will be easy because no one dared to do it. That's how he comes up with the name of his company, Thunder Express. Sometime later, they open their offices and were getting everything ready for the big launch. The only thing they needed was the delivery drivers. That's when a group of bikers show up who look like thugs. But in reality, they were Santi's friends. They had worked together in the mountains before, and he knew there was no one better than them. Also with them was Monty, Santi's younger brother. When he saw him, he wasn't very happy with the idea because he wanted his brother to go back to their mother and finish his studies. But the boy didn't think the same way. He wanted to work and be successful like his older brother. The next day, they would finally start their operations. And for that, they launched a strong advertising campaign. Thunder would make a strong entrance into the market, offering door-to-door delivery. The delivery riders would each function as their own branch, so they would have more branches than their direct competition. That's how they started their operations. He went out with them to make deliveries and take orders. With that new service, the people decided to give them a chance, and on their first day, they received almost 4,000 packages. But not everything can be perfect. It turns out there were many packages sent to fake addresses, like abandoned houses and empty lots. Since they were very far away, the delivery drivers used up a lot of fuel and couldn't deliver real orders, which meant a huge expense for them. It turns out their competitors were sending the fake packages with the sole purpose of harming them. There were so many that their warehouse would soon be full. This was a strategy by Mr. Canaan because he, better than anyone, knew that Santi was a threat, even though his son didn't think so. That's why he shows him the painting he bought, tells him that a poor boy painted it, and since he couldn't afford linseed oil, he used grease instead. That's why he wanted to stop Santi, because poverty forces you to be creative. And unfortunately, his son didn't have that. Back to Santi, things had gotten complicated. He got beaten up by a customer who sent a very expensive perfume to his wife, but it still hadn't arrived. Santi promises him that he'll solve it in 3 days, and because of that, he spends hours and hours thinking about how to overcome this problem. And Xiao Yu tells him that he's just like her father, since he was also a businessman, And with him, things were always all or nothing. He thanks her for the comparison and tells her that the only way to win is not to give up. That's how he manages to discover the pattern of the ghost addresses. It turns out they were all foreclosed properties. With that information, they block all the fake addresses and would no longer accept fake packages. But that wasn't enough. Santi wanted to fight back, so he offers a juicy bonus to the sales team. If they manage to steal more clients from the competition, they'll be winners. That's how a real war begins. Santi always went after the big fish. That's how he found a lady who sold sauces and made a lot of shipments every week. He asked her to trust him and promised that when his company became the biggest shipping company, he would give her free shipping for a whole year. She agrees and tells him she hopes he keeps his promise. His employees, for their part, used all kinds of tricks to get new clients, and that's how they managed to get the juicy bonus. Everything seemed to be going well for our shipping company, but Mr. Kanan was not happy. And as a result, neither was his son. Santi takes advantage of this victory to send him a package, just as he had said that he would be nothing but a fly if he competed against him. Afterwards, as a symbol of their victory, they burn all the fake packages. Sometime later, the company had become very successful, so they reinvested everything and bought better equipment. They were also looking to expand to reach farther, but the company that controlled the northeast of the territory had already won. The owner was very distrustful and didn't believe that Santi would keep his word, but luckily he convinced him to stay for a party. There, he saw what Santi was truly like. He wasn't like the businessman who tried to get rich at the expense of others. He lived alongside his employees, and they treated him like just another friend. That convinced him, and he agreed to become part of the company. With him on their side, they became the company with the greatest coverage in the country, and they were one step closer to being the #1 company. After celebrating, Santi and Xiaoyu are left alone. They got along very well, and she tells him that with the company's growth, maybe she can retire earlier. He answers her that he doesn't want her to leave, but he understands why she wants to go. Then she tells him about her dream. She wants to marry her fiancé and raise him in a small house where they can watch him grow up. Then she tells him that the company they created is like their child, and seeing it grow makes her very happy. Santi asks her not to leave and to watch their child grow up together. But before she can answer, Linux starts vomiting and completely ruins the moment. The next day, the Chinese investor goes to visit their company. Mr. Kanan's son thought he was going to congratulate him, but he was very angry because they were losing. Faced with a company that came out of nowhere and had less investment, he tells him to get his act together, or else he will be replaced. For their part, Santi and Xiaoyu felt very uncomfortable after what happened last night, so they couldn't even look each other in the face. But they didn't have time for that because, once again, Mr. Kanan would play dirty. He had several branches shut down with the help of the authorities. Even so, Santi doesn't give up and decides to open 2 new branches for everyone that gets shut down. He also decides to lower his prices from 25 baht to 19 baht. Because of that, Mr. Kanan calls him and warns him not to start a price war because his small company won't be able to handle it. But Santi tells him he won't do that, and instead of just making it a promotion, he'll keep that price until he can beat him. When Xiaoyu finds out, she gets angry, because with their current process, they won't make any profit. And with that price, they can't even cover their costs. And if they keep going like this, they can only last for 4 months. Santi tells her to trust him, that more investors will follow, but Xiaoyu tells him it won't be that easy. Santi doesn't have a plan. He just blindly trusts that things will work out. When she hears this, she gets upset, but she doesn't want the company to go bankrupt. So they have to make cuts in order to survive a couple of more months. Luigi was against it. He didn't want his team's salaries to be cut. This causes a big commotion because now all the employees have to work more, but they'll get paid less. But since it was only the first week, it wasn't much of a problem. That night, Xiaoyu's fiancé was going to visit her. Santi asks to go with them so he can meet her fiancé, and she agrees. That night, the 3 of them have dinner together. That's when Santi realizes that Xiaoyu is very different with her fiancé. She laughs and is more delicate. On the other hand, at work, she is cold and calculating. After dinner, Santi boasts about his company and tells her that he couldn't have achieved it without her. That's why he hopes she can stay a little longer. But her fiancé tells her that it's better if she sells the 5% stake, and that way they'd have enough money to get by for a few more months. Xiaoyu tells him that it's not necessary, So her fiancé gets angry because he thinks he won't be able to keep his promise to get married in 2 years. Besides, he was aware of the company's finances. He knew that with the price war, they only had a few months left to survive. That's why he's afraid that his fiancé's efforts have been in vain. At the hotel, her fiancé decides to leave because Thunder's success depends on everything going well and a stroke of luck. The next day, things get even worse because there was a delivery workers' strike. Santi tries to explain to them, but even his brother was against him. Many people were quitting. Others, like Santi's friends, were stealing from the company. That's why Santi had to teach them a lesson. Even though he cared about him a lot, he knew that if he let it go, he would lose the respect of his employees. And in the situation he's in, that would be very dangerous. Moreover, to make things worse, the competition launched a package safety campaign. They launched it right after the video leaked, where Santi burns the fake packages. That created a lot of rumors and distrust, even though Santi tried to explain it, but Mr. Kanan had bought off the press. With things going so badly, Santi breaks down and was about to collapse, but luckily, Xiaoyu tells him to reconsider and that he can't give up, because if he loses, everyone will lose with him. When he left the company, there was a bullet on the hood of his car with a note that said, "This is what your life is worth." That scares Santi a lot, and he doesn't want to leave the building, but the opportunity he had been waiting for appears, so he goes out. Despite the threats, an electronics store wanted to set up in the country, and for that, they needed a company to make deliveries. That's why all the delivery companies gathered to compete. It turns out they had sent champagne glasses through each of the delivery companies, and the ones that arrive intact will move on to the next phase, but Thunder Express's package still hadn't arrived. Santi thought it was because they ran out of couriers, but luckily the courier had just gotten confused. But he couldn't. And he left Kaninsi and Kanin and the Kaninsa.
Siguiente fase, la cual era conseguir
He could,
en el evento más importante de Asia, el
Kanan left, but not Mr. Kanan. And Mr. Kanan left. And the gentleman who gets more points will be the winner. But that date was very far away. With their current finances, they would never make it, so they ask the investor for money. She tells them that's fine, but she wants another 15% to have 30%. Xiaoyu wanted to accept, but Santi and Luigi tell her no. Later, Santi.
persona que dejó la bala fue su hermano menor.
That's why he decides to teach him a lesson. He puts the bullet in a gun and tells him to go through with his threat, to pull the trigger and finish him off. Right now. His brother gets really scared and tells him not to joke about those things. Santi tells him that dying is easy, but keeping on fighting is what's really hard. That's why he decides to name him leader of the delivery guys. The boy thought it would be a good idea and that he could help the others. But soon he realized that in reality, it was a punishment, because his co-workers thought he had betrayed them, and that he was no longer one of them. On the other hand, Mr. Kanin had gone to visit Santi because he wanted to buy the company, according to him, for 20% more than it's worth. He tells him that he's being generous and that he knows about his financial situation. He knows they only have a few months left. Santi gets upset because he thinks Xiaoyu revealed the financial statements, but she tells him she would never do something like that. Santi tells him it's fine, that he will sell his company, but he wants 10 times more. Mr. Kanan answers that he's a foolish idiot. Then, Xiaoyu tells him that no bank wants to lend them money and that, feeling cornered, this seems to be the best offer. If they keep this up, they won't reach November 11th. Santi gets upset and reaffirms to them that he won't sell. He also tells her that she can go get married and stop working. Xiaoyu was furious, so she packs her bags and goes to see the investor. Santi thought that she had betrayed them and sold the 30% she was asking for, but in reality, she only sold her shares in the company, meaning 5%. When she comes back, Santi is furious and yells at her, calling her a traitor. But it turns out that she sold her shares and also got a loan, and everything was for the company. So that they could reach November 11th, she had decided to play just like Santi and bet everything on the chance that they could win. That he wants to be in debt to her, but Xiaoyu tells him there's no other way. Then, in her room, she calls her boyfriend. He confesses to her that he never went back to China. All this time, he had been waiting at the same hotel. Xiaoyu is very moved, and she asks him to give her a little more time, promising that this will be the last time, whether she succeeds or not. After November 11th, she will marry him. His girlfriend agrees and tells him that she will be waiting for him. For his part, Santi was thinking about what his next campaign would be, how they would beat their competition on November 11th. So, while looking at the watch that Mr. Kanan gave him, a brilliant idea comes to his mind. The next day, he gathers the people he trusts the most and reveals his plan to them. He knew there was a mole in the company, but he didn't think it was any of them, so he asks them to keep his plan a secret. The master stroke to win the competition was the next day. They would be the first company to deliver orders within 24 hours. Santi already had everything planned out. He was sure that with that, they could crush all their competition. But it turns out that Linux was the mole. She leaked the whole plan because Mr. Kanan's son was paying her. Treatment for her mother one day before November 11th, Santi motivates his workers, asks them to give it their all because maybe it will be the last time. He thanks them for having accompanied him on his journey and hopes it won't be the last time. For his part, Luigi does the same with his team, especially with Linux. He apologizes for having been so hard on her and hopes that after winning, they can go to the hospital to visit her mother. This makes everyone work harder, but Linux felt devastated because she had betrayed them when they treated her very well. The next day was the big day, and when they launched the campaign, it was a complete success. Many chose Thunder Express to deliver their orders, but the competition also launched the same promotion. Even so, Santi decided to keep going since they were first and the future of his company depended on it. Everyone was giving their best effort. It was a fierce battle because people were fighting for their jobs. If the company lost, it wouldn't just be Santi who lost, but all of them. On the other hand, the competition, even though they had better equipment, were losing. That's why Mr. Kanan's son decides to use his ace up his sleeve. He orders Linux to sabotage the system so they can't classify the products. In exchange, he will send her mother abroad so she can get treatment for her illness. She accepts, and all the orders are left hanging. Although deep down she didn't want to do it, she had no other choice. Her mother's life was more important. Santi asks Luigi to fix it, but he sadly tells him he can't do it. He needs at least 20 hours to come back and fix it. The orders were piling up and the trucks kept arriving. If they didn't do something, they would lose the competition. And he tells her to leave and that he won't report her. This makes the girl feel even worse. Then, Santi comes up with an idea. They should sort the products themselves. For that, he asks his workers to bring all their family and friends. He promises to pay everyone 1,000 baht for that day of work. But since the company no longer had any money, he will sell his car. He was literally betting everything. If he loses, he'll be left with nothing. That's how they managed to sort everything in record time. But when they were about to finish, they ran out of trucks. Mr. Kanan knew that somehow Santi would manage to overcome his problems. That's why he wanted to make sure he would fail. So he rented all the trucks in the area just so he couldn't use them. Luckily, they decided to send the last orders by plane, so they would be able to fulfill all their orders on time. But once again, Mr. Kanan wanted to take them down. So he used his influence to get the police to set up a checkpoint. Before reaching the airport, one of their drivers was very nervous because he said he had used drugs. Luckily, he tested clean and promised never to do it again. But one of his trusted men tested positive. According to him, he used it because he couldn't sleep. Also, they couldn't find the truck's registration. But it turns out the person in charge was another traitor. He was working for the competition and had sabotaged the test. Meanwhile, to try to save the delivery, Luigi sends all the delivery drivers in the area. But that wasn't enough. Luckily, Santi found the truck's registration and was able to continue on his way just when it seemed like he was going to make it. A van crosses his path, so Santi has a terrible accident. Also, it had started to rain and the packages were going to get wet. Luckily, his friends from the mountain arrived, and with them, they managed to take all the orders to the airport. For his part, Mr. Kanan wanted to secure his victory. So he talks to the owner of the airline and asks him to unload all the Thunder Express packages. But it turns out that Santi asked Xiaoyu to be the only one who knows the flight number, so Mr. Kanan had the wrong number. That's how they managed to send all their orders. After so much struggle and so many setbacks, had they finally made it? When he found out that the flight had left, Mr. Kanan knew he had lost. The next day, Santi made the deliveries himself. And during one of them, he was so tired that he fainted just as he woke up. They called him to announce the winner of the contest, and just as Santi said, Only those who stop fighting lose. All his struggle and sacrifice had been rewarded. Thunder Express won the contest and secured more than 70 million deliveries a year. With that volume, they would finally be, by far, the #1 delivery company in the country. All their employees celebrate and cry with happiness because they had also risked everything. Sometime later, Mr. Cannon had to sell his company because they could no longer compete against Thunder. His son, for his part, was disappointed because even though he played dirty, he couldn't win. That's why he says he's not made for this world, and he resigns from all of his father's companies. When Santi returned to the company, Xiaoyu was already gone. They had thrown her a farewell party, and Santi arrived late, on purpose because he was afraid she might choose to stay. Then Luigi thanks him, tells him it was an honor to work with him, and thanks him for insisting so much at the beginning. Without him, his talent would have been wasted. Sometime later, Thunder had become the #1 company, and Santi was one of the richest men in the country. His former boss sees his photo in the newspaper, and he was very proud of him because Santi still kept the scale he gave him as a gift. Also, one day, Santi wanted to tell his mother that he was the owner of his own company. He never told her anything so as not to worry her, but when he wanted to surprise her, it turned out she already knew. His younger brother had told her everything. She tells him that she is very proud of him. Sometime later, Santi visits Xiaoyu. He wanted to return the money she had lent to his company. He also thanks her for believing in him and helping him not to give up. Then, he says goodbye to her. Xiaoyu, for her part, had managed to fulfill her dream. She got married, had a child, and together with her husband, they raised him in a house that wasn't so small. Then he goes to say goodbye to his rival. Mr. Cannon was going to retire. Although they were enemies, they respected each other. Maybe because both of them built their empires from nothing. They look at each other with respect and say goodbye like gentlemen. And that's how this story ends. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If so, I invite you to give me a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any summaries. And I'll see you in the next story.